the ATF versus the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Flare guns. When are you allowed to fire them? You're not. They're always a distress signal. Red is for distress only. A false mayday is taken very seriously. No one should respond, however, to a specific color flare. What is it used for? It has every single characteristic except that it's a different color. White. They may do it anyway. There's an incident where a cop fired one for illumination so he could see what was going on. It still got the Coast Guard to show up because he was near the coast. And 911 in a helicopter. Normal citizen gets told you have to pay for the gas for the helicopter. But white practice flares are usually, or were usually, included until they figured out it was a bad idea because they're very tempting. And it says on it, practice flare, and it also gives you a bunch of instructions everyone ignored because there's not enough room on it. So here's the instructions you didn't get. They have clear markings on the exterior. You use these flares to familiarize yourself with deploying an emergency signal. They were required by law at one time. This should not be done, but what's actually done, because they're very hard to get, but you can get them, I'll have links below. You can use expired red flares, and they're often used to train individuals who do not have any experience with flare guns, but only under these conditions. You go to the U.S. Coast Guard building and ask them where to go. Just get the information. But usually in the presence of a governing agency like the U.S. Coast Guard or whatever. Or when previous permission has been given by the governing agency themselves. Here's what you have to do. The person in charge of the training or demonstration should make a clear statement on the International Hailing Distress VHF Signal 16, which states, this is my location, this is how long we're going to be doing something, the type of and number of signals that will be fired for training or for demonstration will be this, and we will be done by that point. Ignore distress signals from this location. You're supposed to repeat it before and after the transmission, the demonstration. Or just contact the Coast Guard and say, where can I set off my old flares for fun that I won't cause distress? The officer being fired upon saw a muzzle flash. Oh, I bet he did. And heard a loud bang and believed that the shot was from a real revolver, not a flare gun. No cartridge or case or gun was found. The suspect was found later to have stolen a flare gun from a boat in the docks, hoping to recover phosphorus so he could make methamphetamine. This is the most convoluted way I could think of to get high. Just go get a damn beer. I mean, seriously, be an alcoholic. He didn't want to get caught with a flare gun. So instead, he threw it at the police officer and it discharged. Now, I'm going to explain something to you. No. The way they're built, unless you shoot a hole through one, it can't go off. Or he pulled back the hammer and then decided instead of shooting the guy, he'd throw it at him. He knew it was a flare gun. He didn't think it would be a good idea to do that. So he threw it at the guy. It hit the ground and went off. He took off running. But let's discuss what he did instead. Up to that point, when he opened his mouth, all they knew is they heard a shot. They had no proof of a shot, but they had the witness testimony of a cop. He admitted to looking to make meth, conspiracy to create methamphetamines, burgled the boat burglar. He didn't want to get caught with a flare gun because that's illegal, and then he shoots at a cop by accident. Or he did it on purpose. He was running at the time, so I'm sure he just threw the damn thing. He says he threw it. And if you shoot a cop with a flare gun, I think they'd know it. He obviously missed. And he would have seen a flare. Someone would have seen this bright thingy going on, unless it was an expired flare that wouldn't go off correctly. Or he loaded it with Rice Krispies. You'll see the icon. Attorneys tell clients not to talk to police. They're not to help you. They're here to build a case no matter what they say, and they're not legally forbidden from lying. The more you talk, the more you jeopardize yourself. The powers that be will cite any incident where a hobbyist or an amateur makes, not manufactures, something, gets injured in pursuit of his hobby. But those individuals who accept the risk and occasionally suffer consequences use that own risk. None of the cases involving injuries to anyone other than adult hobbyists engaging voluntarily in activity known to entail some risk. Therefore, you shouldn't outlaw skydiving. No cases of an unsuspecting 10-year-old kid getting hurt by components sold to them to make whatever by an unscrupulous or profiteering bootlegger or involved sale and distribution to the public to make a .22 caliber out of a pellet gun. We're not the problem. Getting rid of us will do nothing to address their actual concerns. But mainstream media will say otherwise. Ghost guns. So let's talk about plastic flare guns and the other exemptions they have. There's an exemption for sporting use for weapons. You can't have an exemption for safety equipment because then you could claim your pistol is for self-protection. The U.S. government has it in their best interest not to let you have not a sporting exemption. It has to be some sort of frickin' hunting weapon. You can't have a weapon to protect yourself. So it's a safety device, but it can't have at least one of the components to make it a firearm. Firearm means a weapon of any kind or a device of any kind from which a projectile or projectiles may be fired by an explosive such as gunpowder. Therefore, a flare gun is not a firearm because exclusively primer-fired flare guns don't have propellant. They have some gunpowder for ignition, but the ignition source is just a primer. The primer has been declared exempted from being high explosive, even though by definition it is, because it's below a certain milligram or grain amount, and its use is primarily intended a certain way. Even though you can use a primer in the butt end of a metal tube and fire a .22 caliber bullet fast enough to technically hurt someone and maybe kill them. Let's talk about flare cartridges all by themselves. What if they don't go off? What if they don't burn? What are they? Well, they're .55 caliber for the ones you get these days most of the time, aka 14 or 15 millimeter, depending on how you're looking up. European Union, Germany, flare cartridges, 15 millimeter, called that. That is the small caliber that can be fired with the same, primer and go a lot higher. Some of them have actual propellant in them, but that's not their primary purpose. It's a propellant, not an explosive. They specifically make sure it acts as a propellant if they include it. Up to 73 caliber, which can be fired out of a shotgun correctly, as long as it doesn't have a choke. These are exclusively primer fired, and after they've exited any kind of barrel length you can come up with, the limit is 4 feet. After 4 feet, if they have any propellant, it can ignite. That's how they get around the rules. That makes them a firework. Meteor and Sky Blazer flare projectiles are named specific ways. The Sky Blazers are the skinnier ones. They're shaped like the ass end of a CO2 cartridge, and they're made of zinc. If you type in zinc flare and then convert it into Germany speak, Kraut speak, you'll find sales sites. 250 to 425 foot altitude, 6 to 8 second burn time, 1500 candle power, 21 mile visibility, 2,000 to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, incendiary. Mass is 100 to 200 grains, or a quarter to half an ounce. Velocity is 200 feet per second to 600 feet per second. 35 to 100 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. This places it easily in the class of being a weapon, but because it includes no propellant that is used within the gun or cartridge, that's the important component, there's a delay timer, it can be classed as fireworks, not a firearm. And yes, you can get toy rockets, put it down there, the same diameter, some of them, and fire it out of a flare gun, and it's legal because it's technically model rocketry. You have to follow all the rules. How does this done? Well, I'm going to compare these weights really quickly. A nitrous oxide cartridge, empty weight, 20 grams or 3/4 of an ounce. Typical 12-gauge shotgun flare projectile mass is about 200 grains or 150, around half an ounce or less. Typical 12-gauge shotgun slugs are an ounce. You're getting up near the point where you're actually doing really big damage. Don't do that. Consumer fireworks are legal under federal law for consumer use. In order to be classified as consumer fireworks, they have to be tested extensively. The Consumer Product Safety Commission has to make the rules, not ATF at this point, because it's not a gun, it's not a firearm, it's not ammunition. They meet various requirements with regard to composition, quantity of pyrotechnic material, and stability of the product under heat and stress, and only then is the item legal for consumer usage. Now you know there's going to be another category. Commercial display fireworks don't meet these certifications and are classified this way and require federal license to purchase and use them. Seeing the parallel with weapons? Now we're going to go to the non-ATF, non-NFA items here. Any person importing his or her own for his or her own use or receiving or transporting display fireworks, not consumer but commercial grade fireworks for fireworks displays, must have a licensed ATF permit, explosives permit. State and local ordinance may ban certain fireworks without permit to own or store. Okay. They didn't mention shooting them off. Only consumer fireworks that do not explode or fly through the air are permitted to be sold to and used by residents in 60% of the states. Fireworks possession and or sales may be limited to 30 days before July 4th, New Year's, or July 24th in a specific state for Pioneer Day. Sellers may pay a fee to sell higher power consumer-only fireworks. Commercial fireworks activity always requires an ATF license. Native American tribe reservation lands are exempt from all of these and can do whatever the hell they want. Some are more equal than others. Now we're going to get to the ATF rules. Display fireworks and consumer fireworks limits are ground devices, not supposed to go in the air, 50 milligrams or less flash powder. Cumulative explosive force equivalent, like dram equivalent. Aerial devices, anything to go in the air. It can be 130 milligrams or less of flash powder. Salutes containing more than 2 grains or that of flash powder. Aerial shells containing more than 40 grams pyrotechnic compositions, excluding the lift charge. And other display pieces which exceed the limits of explosive materials for classification as consumer fireworks are under commercial only. And now the ATF website. Look up the word stump. Persons who manufacture, they had to change that, it says now make, because manufacture has a specific legal meaning now. Persons who make explosives for personal non-business use, non-taxable, making fireworks to set off on your own property, or using tannerite to remove a stump, are not required to have a manufacturer's license. But no person may ship, transport, or cause to be transport or receive explosive materials unless such person holds a license or permit. Without a license, one cannot transport, sell, or store mixtures, just components. That means until you use them, you gotta leave them separate. You mix them together and them off immediately. They have to be expended at site. Do not mix more than you can use, and don't allow an accident to happen. You're 100% liable, and you cannot collect insurance, protecting the insurance companies. The Consumer Product Safety Commission regulates consumer fireworks through a Federal Hazardous Substance Act. The National Fire Protection Association sets codes to minimum standards for display commercial fireworks and safety. And if you break any of the rules, whether or not you're supposed to be under the listing or not, doesn't matter. Both can come at you. And as long as it doesn't have all 3 components of a propellant for lifting charge, a projectile, doesn't matter what it is, and an initiator, primer, it's not ATF restricted because it's not ammunition or a gun. But it's explosives. Unless it's propellant. Yes, you can make a gun that only shoots propellant and does nothing else. They're called blanks. Well, it's an explosive. No, it's considered a propellant. It's a low explosive. Definitions are fun, like firearm versus any other weapon. There were a number of companies that legally sold fireworks components. Consumer Product Safety Commission decided to do entrapment cases they lost by getting them to ship things by saying, I'm trying to make a bomb. And also went after hobbyists because they became annoying. Red is for distress only. False maydays are taken seriously. No one should ever fire one. You can fire the white practice flares, which are sold sometimes. They have clear markings on the exterior. If you can't find them and you want to learn how to do this, you can go to any Coast Guard location, ask them where and when to do these, but basically you have to get their permission or help with it. Or the police department or fire department. Next. If you make a mistake while doing these experiments, you can create a firebomb or a pipe bomb. Be careful. Learn. Read. And if you can't find the information because these assholes keep hiding it, Archive.org is your friend. Links below.